Hello, my name is Aaron Mans. This is my audience. And today I'm going to be doing my persuasive speech. When I was a kid growing up in the 90s, my favorite thing to do was to come home after a long day at school, plop down on the couch, and play some video games long into the night. Though there was always that nagging feeling in the back of my head that the controversy surrounding video game violence would change the way that I enjoy my favorite hobby. Many parents are concerned that the graphic depictions of violence in video games will influence their children to commit violent acts. Now, I've been playing video games since I was a kid, and I have never once committed a violent act. And I think many others who have played video games turned out pretty well too. But that doesn't mean that those concerns are invalid. In fact, especially because of how widespread that the media and the hobby has become, it becomes even more important to take this into account. So I think that if I address the major complaints and criticisms surrounding video game violence, talk about what is being done to protect the children from violent media, and eventually discuss why it should not be censored and regulated, that I can convince you all that it's not a good thing to try to censor video games, and that they don't really deserve the blame that they have been getting. So the major criticisms can be summed up into three major points. With increased technology, the violence becomes more real. The thought is as graphics and technology improve, the more graphic and real depiction of a human being would make the lines between reality and fantasy blur and sort of alter the minds of the children. It gives positive reinforcement for violent acts. In many games, you will be rewarded for killing a number of people, perhaps going to the next stage or the next level of a game. And it glorifies psychotic and sometimes criminal actions. This doesn't apply to every game, but in a game such as Grand Theft Auto, you play as a mobster going around committing crimes and killing people, which is very similar to the movie Scarface, where you're a mobster and you go around killing people. So the major complaint about video games is that it, more than any other media, fosters violent behavior. Violent crimes, though, have very few links to violence in video games. The example that people bring up when they talk about video game violence is the Columbine massacre, where a number of teenagers went in and shot up their school. Afterwards, they were interrogated, and they said that they really enjoyed the video game Doom, which is a first-person shooter, and the media jumped on that and pretty much blamed it for the tragedy. However, when you look deeper, you realize those children had very broken homes and had very difficult family lives. Though most people tend to gloss over that in favor of seeing what media they consume. Video game violence is no more influential than any other medium. There have been many studies around video game violence. People would be brought into rooms, and after they played video games, they would exhibit aggressive behavior. They would be more aggressive than they were. However, the same test was done with movies, other media, and music, and any sort of violent medium has the same sort of reaction, so video games are not special in that regard. So there's no real evidence to support a link between video games and violent behavior. However, you don't want to show your 10-year-old son a violent movie, so maybe you don't want to have him play a violent video game. So the ESRB was developed to sort of help parents make those decisions for their children. It's a rating system for games. It goes from early childhood to adults only. Now, only 21 games have ever received an adults only rating, and that's because the rating system heavily influenced the sales of the game. It's very much like the movie rating system. If you want your movie to sell, if you want people to come see it, you might want to aim for that PG-13 as opposed to the R, since it would go to a wider audience. And so most game developers try to curb back the violence a little bit so they can go between the E and T ratings, which are the most sold. So it's really a job for the parents. The SRB does what it can, and it prohibits the sale of M-rated games to children over the counter. Though when I was a kid and I was 10 years old, every other kid had the most violent games out there. And that's because they didn't go up there and just ask for it. They couldn't get it. They asked their parents to get it for them. And their parents didn't know what they're getting, so they happily went up there and purchased it. And so parents need to do more research on their purchases for their children. The ESRB could do a better job of giving that information out there, but it really comes to the parents. They need to take the time to go out there, research what they're getting for their children, and then if they don't think it's appropriate, sit down with their child and talk to them and say, this is why and why you can't play this game. It just comes to that relationship between the parent and the child. Which leads me to my next point. The biggest myth surrounding video games is that they are products made for children. That's not true anymore. There are children who play video games, a number of children play video games, but the age of the average gamer is 18 to 34, well adults. There's 60% male, 40% female. So treating it like it's a children's toy not only cheapens the medium, it simply pegs it as something it simply isn't. It is not a child's toy. It's a broad medium with a large range of genres and feelings and sorts of games. So you can't really regulate or censor something that big that reaches so many different people. I have a lot of friends, a lot of different age groups and a lot of different genders, different ethnicities, and they all enjoy different sorts of games. So they can't be held to a universal standard. You can't peg them all to rule under a certain stringent set of rules. They all have to be different. You would destroy the industry. Marketing should portray the contents of the product. It should, again, it's up to the parents to take the time and use the tools they have to gather information so that they can get the products that are best for their children. So it really all boils down to that relationship between the child, the parent, and the gaming companies. The criticisms that apply to video games also apply to all different sorts of violent media. The parents have to take the time to sit down and talk with their children and discuss why they can and can't play certain games. So in order for gaming to become a respected media, it can't be censored and it can't be regulated because that would cripple it. That would peg it as a child's toy for the rest of its life. It has to move on past this. And once video games have become more part of the society and more prevalent between parents and children, it will be able to mature. And then we as a society can get past this thought that video games are the perpetrators of major violence in our society. So hopefully today I've convinced you that it's not the video games that are to blame. It's no one really to blame. It's just our goal as a society to come together and hopefully find a peaceful resolution to this issue. Thank you very much.